No, I'm truly a fan, Craig. I have to warn you.
Thank you.
Hola, hi everyone. Hola a todos. Today I am with a special guest, Craig Bartlett, creator of Hey Arnold. How are you, Craig?
Hola, hi everybody. I'm great, thank you.
Craig, I have as many Chileans and South America. I know you were in a guest in El Arnoldo from Argentina.
That's right.
And when they have you as a guest, my mind exploded because I didn't think I was going to be able sometime to have you as a guest. So I have to thank those guys, to illuminate my way.
They're lovely people.
Yeah, and you were.
I thought they were very kind about Chile too. They had to give it up, but there's even more fans in Chile.
I have, as many Chileans, I have great passion for your work, for Hey Arnold, so I hope this conversation reflects that passion. Arnold has it has the greatest room of all time, right?
I think so, in my humble opinion. That's a bedroom I would have loved to have as a kid.
You design some aspects of that room with magic realism in mind. Gabriel Garcia Marquez. What can you tell me about it?
Well, yeah, I thank you for asking about magical realism, because it comes up very often in cartoon making, because I feel like we're already, even a cartoon that's as realistic as Hey Arnold, I mean, it suggests a real city. I mean, people get into arguments all the time about which American city it is, and I'm like, it isn't any American city. It's a made up city. Hillwood is a place that only exists on TV. But that, I think that reflects how seriously people take the reality of Hey Arnold. It feels kind of real, and so I said, look, let's try to make it real. We know it won't be. It's a cartoon, and it shouldn't be. I mean, I based Arnold's boarding house that he lives in on places I had seen when I was a student and walking around Seattle and Portland. And I was like, I would love to make a building built a little more than 100 years ago that was made out of older materials, brick and wood, that reflects a kind of a bygone time. And his neighborhood is actually supposed to seem like kind of passed over. And in English, we call it a freeway overpass that goes over the house. And it literally as if it was passed over by the more modern parts of the city that are farther away. And so when I made Arnold's room, that was inside the house. And so I was very influenced by 100 Years of Solitude by Garcia Marquez. And what I loved about that was he created spaces that constantly changed, and there was magic even in the architecture. And another John Crowley is an American author who wrote a book called Little Big, which to me was like an American Garcia Marquez. He also suggested that we were living kind of right next to parallel universes and things that were there was magic everywhere if you just knew how to look for it. And so I wanted Arnold's room to reflect that, and I wanted the layout of the boarding house to reflect that too, where you might find a room that you didn't know existed. And I even, the thing that was fun about making 100 episodes of Hey Arnold was I could make jokes that referred to things. When Grandpa, what was it? It was in season 2, the one Big Caesar, where the boys want to go catch the giant mythological fish, and Grandpa says, "Come on, Arnold, it's time to go to the fishing room." And Arnold goes, "We have a fishing room?" And that was an inside joke. It was like, why doesn't Arnold know there's a fishing room? And you remember Grandma takes Arnold to the Zen meditation room too, where she begins his martial arts training. He had never been there before. And so it's a little silly, Arnold basically is kind of living in a magical realism all the time. And I think because we're making cartoons, that's the least we can do. You know, we should always aspire to have that much magic in what we're doing. And so I was really conscious of it because the city felt kind of real, so it was always that balance between real and magic.
Very few TV shows that I've seen, animation or real, have given me that sense of a place than Hillwood. When you said that Hillwood is fictional, I get that, of course, but but let me tell you, for many of us, it's real, or it echoes some places here in Chile, very far away. We know, or people we meet on the street, markets that maybe a few days later are not going to exist because it's not economical boom. You know, it's in the other side of where things, you know, are functioning. From the iconic opening of the series, the night, the music, you know, the kids playing, the neighborhood is alive. From that starting point, I get a sense of a place.
Yeah, the main title. That's what we call, you know, what we call that the minute. Actually, I think it's a 45-second tune. And some cartoons now start much faster. They only get like 15 seconds to show their main title, or 30. That's pretty standard now, 30 or less. And I always wanted to have the main title be as long as I could, because it's an opportunity to really pour a lot of energy. You know, we put a lot of energy into making that. We knew it would play at the front of every episode and people would see it over and over again. So you want to make it pretty good. You know, the animation needs to be good, and you're trying to set this up. This is what you can expect. And I had later shows that I made, like Dinosaur Train, for example. I wrote a song that was even more on the nose, as we say. It describes, once upon a time there was a mom, her name was Mrs. Pteranodon, and you watch the kids get hatched and Buddy gets hatched, and you set up the entire TV series in that song. Hey Arnold, on the other hand, Jim Lang just came to me with that tune, and although we did think it would be funny if Helga yelled out "Hey Arnold" 4 times, and to say "Move it, football head," that seemed like it was an important. We'd established that Helga is sort of forever kind of tormenting Arnold and her obsession with him. But other than that, we thought, well, we'll just have music. We'll have them all marching as if they're all going to gather and meet. And to tell you the truth, I was basing that on my love for the movie West Side Story, where the Jets and the Sharks, 2 different gangs, are marching toward the meeting place where they're going to have a rumble. And you know, Hey Arnold is a show for kids, and so they aren't going to meet and rumble, but it's more like they're all going to meet, and the boys and the girls are going to face off and kind of throw down. That's basically what that main title's about. And you know, we were just starting. We made that right away as we were starting the first few episodes, and we had a long way to go. There was a lot we didn't know about the series yet, but that was my start. It'll be like the kids are coming out at night and they're gonna rumble.
No, what I love about reading interviews about you and people, you know, that study the aesthetics behind Hey Arnold, we got me to learn a lot. And I knew Edward Hopper from before, but when you quote Edward Hopper, it instantly, you know, sparked in my head, you know, Big Al Tasty Cafe in the opening.
Yeah.
Maybe it has a reference somewhere. And if you can speak about Edward Hopper and your love.
I've always loved Edward Hopper. I had a pretty traditional fine art training. Once I went to college, I went to a 4-year art school in Portland, Oregon, where I was trained to draw and paint and use traditional materials. as if I was going to be an artist, a fine artist. And if that had been my path, I probably would have tried to move to New York, I guess, and make it in that art scene. But the truth was, when I was an art student, I felt that the fine art career was a little too serious. It was like it was a very serious thing. And we were very postmodern by the time I went to art school. So there was nothing about that particularly interested me. I was much more interested in art for storytelling. And that led me to comics, and which I'd grown up on comics as well. And I loved watching cartoons as a kid. So I just realized the place for me to go was out of fine art and into animation, especially TV animation, making shows for kids, which were as straightforward a kind of storytelling as you get. But as an art student, I loved Edward Hopper. That's one of my favorite things to do, is to go to an art museum and look at paintings in person, because they always look different than when they're published. I mean, a painting that you can see how they painted it, and you can stand there and kind of get an idea of the size of it and witness what it must have been like to stand there and paint it. That's one of the thrills for me. And Hopper did not disappoint. His paintings, taking in 300 of them, I realized this guy, he's a patron saint of mine. He's a holy man.
We are already falling in love with Hey Arnold, but knowing this stuff, opens our minds, to make connections about other artists behind the artists. So yeah, it's great. It's great. And you recently, I think, share a story about the character or the person behind Gertie, Pookie.
Gertie, yeah, yeah.
You know where I'm going to. Helen Sellers was your grandmother.
My abuela.
Abuela.
It's funny. My grandma, we called her Nanny. Her name was Helen, but we called her Nanny. She died a long time ago. She died probably 20 years ago. And so I haven't been around her for a really long time now, but it's kind of wonderful I've been very interested in keeping her memory alive. Both my parents are gone now, and all my grandparents, aunts, uncles, they've all died of old age. And it's very funny to be in the situation. I'm not a grandfather yet, but to be in the situation where myself and my sisters and my cousins, we're the elders now. And when we get together, it's on us to throw a reunion, have a party, gather everybody. And the best we can manage, because we still think of ourselves as kids, the best thing that we can manage is to maybe have a picnic at a favorite beach in Washington State, where they all live. All the rest of my family's up in the Pacific Northwest, north of Seattle, and west of there. But when we get together, it's like we'll go to the deli and buy some chicken and stuff to make sandwiches, and we'll put out that to eat. And our parents and grandparents used to make these giant feasts. When we used to get together for a family reunion when I was a kid, there would be a giant table full of food that my grandma and my aunts had made. And I don't even understand how we seem to have almost lost that tradition. We don't really know how to host in the same way. We've kind of moved to different places. We live all over the place. I live in Los Angeles, so it's a 1,000-mile trip to go up to north of Seattle, where my family is. But I just think about that now. I think about what a kind of fantastic person my grandma was to help raise us. She had a little place on a lake in Washington where she would drive us all through the summer. I spent a lot of summers with my grandma, and I just think of her as a kind of a remarkable person because of her incredible energy. She was what we call a firecracker. she was just like bustling around making stuff all the time. And so I think I probably inherited a little bit of my grandma's energy and that kind of drive to do things. And she wouldn't have thought of herself as a creative person. She would have thought of herself as a kind of a mom and a grandma and a homemaker. But she had incredible energy and creativity. And I know I got some of her best stuff rubbed off on me. And so I'm very interested in keeping her memory alive. And it's super cool to post stories about my grandma. I posted that when she turned 111 in June, and I posted one of my favorite pictures of her where she's riding a pig. She's sitting on a very large hog. In fact, I think I might have it here. She's sitting on a very large hog that she's riding, that she's got a rope around his neck. And yeah, here's the sketch that I did. To commemorate, at the beginning of this year, I realized that Nanny was going to turn 111 in June, and I was like, oh, I'm going to make this year about Nanny. I'm going to do tributes to her, and just commemorate her life. She lived an incredible life. When you think about it, being born in 1912, that was even before World War I. And she lived on a ranch that was incredibly primitive, far from towns, and a pretty deserty part of Washington State that's not, I can't imagine it would be easy to have a ranch out there. I know they moved from there into a town when she was a kid, and she went to high school in a small town not far from there. But I think the ranching idea was probably not, I don't think it was a terrific ranch, but it was horse country. There were probably hardly even any automobiles out there yet. And so she lived in a time that was much simpler than the time we're living in now. And I like that kind of continuity. In my career, I came to Los Angeles to start working as an animator in the end of the 80s. And I got to work with a few people in 93 when I made 94, I made the Arnold pilot. My editor was a guy named Sam Horta, who was quite old. And he edited the Arnold pilot on film on an old Moviola editing machine that it just looks hilariously old fashioned now. And our sound was on mag tape, and he'd start it up and it would go like, and you couldn't believe what an old fashioned bit of filmmaking just for the beginning of the Arnold series. And Sam was an old guy who'd worked for Walt Disney on the old Disney cartoons. And so I like that in my life. I've been around for a while, and I've been able to know people who remembered way back at the very beginning of cartoon making. So anyway, I'm all about I'm trying to kind of recognize who my mentors were and to celebrate them, because sometimes while it was happening, I didn't even realize that they were my mentors. But yeah, I got to know some pretty cool people.
But it makes complete sense when someone watches Hey Arnold, Craig, because I think Hey Arnold, finally, it's an exercise on memory. I mean, we get to know the boarding house, Sunset Arms, from 100 years prior the the construction. We knew the place, so you make up a history about a place that makes sense about where you're coming from.
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right, and it was conscious. I love history, and when I was growing up, I was encouraged to read by Nanny and by my Aunt Gert, who the name Gertie actually comes from. My father's Aunt Gert gave me books and told me, you should read this. This is really good. And so I had a really strong, vivid sense of history, and I loved the history of where I was from, the pioneers that came to Washington State and settled it. And it's a mess. I mean, Washington was settled by white settlers in the 1800s, and they cut down all the woods and they fished all the salmon out of the water, and they basically, you know, obliterated stuff and moved in and built their cities. And it was kind of terrible, really. It was not a peaceful transition. They just basically came in and, you know, built Seattle, where I was born. But I still felt like, well, I'm really interested in the history of how this stuff all went down. And I think we should always remember how things came about. And so I wanted to show that in, you might remember there's an episode, Grandpa would tell stories to Arnold. I think it might have been in the Part-Time Friends episode when Arnold and Gerald have their big falling out. I think Grandpa's telling Arnold about when he was a kid, and we had a long panorama down Vine Street, and all you see is like empty land, and then the boarding house, and then more empty land, and then I think Vitello's, and so you knew the whole city came in and filled that up eventually. But Grandpa could think back to a time when there was just fields behind the boarding house. And so I thought people would really dig that, and of course they do. And I also am always borrowing my favorite motifs I'm getting from movies I saw. There's The Age of Innocence that Martin Scorsese made. It shows they call it the Dakotas, the uptown Manhattan. When they first built the houses up there would be a house and then a bunch of fields and another house, and they called it the Dakotas because it's, to them, that was a joke. It was like North Dakota compared to downtown. And so I love that stuff. That appeals to me so much. It appeals to me to kind of think about what a young country the United States really is, and how freshly arrived the white Europeans are at coming in and barging in and making their towns. And I feel like it's I don't know, that really informed my childhood. And so that's why I put it in Hey Arnold.
If you drop one of us, fans of Hey Arnold, in Hillwood, we will know how to move there. We know that place, you know? Yeah.
And that's what's fun too, is that we'd make a map. We have maps of Hillwood, and we would make I don't know if a floor plan exists for the boarding house, which is probably, it kind of does. It has a footprint, but you also know that it's really bigger inside than any floor plan. It's kind of magical. But I think that's the same way with Arnold's town, is that you could go, oh, let's make an island. You know, let's make a peninsula that they have to go out on. And so it kind of expands out from that real map of the center.
One of the most emotional for me and many people, heart-wrenching, you know, episodes is the Christmas one that ends, you know, season 1. We get to know the story behind Mr. Hume, which is a Vietnamese immigrant in the US. And he's been separated from his family, you know, decades. And there's some melancholy to that character that's always there. But in that episode, we get, you know, a rear view mirror about his past. And I read that a fascinating fact about the voice behind Mr. Hume. There's truth behind Hey Arnold.
Yeah. Well, you know, the cool thing that we did was we said, if the kid's black, we should find a black actor to play him, and if the boarder is Vietnamese, we should hire a Vietnamese person to play him. And that was a very wise move, because I mean, especially Asians in cartoons, it's every cartoon voiceover person has a Chinese guy that they like to do, because, you know, they go down to the market and they hear the Chinese guy, and they enjoy mimicking that accent. But now, you know, things nowadays, it's like, no, man, you can't do a white guy shouldn't do a Chinese accent. It should be a Chinese guy to do it. And we've learned in the time that I've been making cartoons that even if it was easy, like, look, there's the 5 of us here, the voiceover people, who's got a Chinese guy. it's easy to do, but you kind of nowadays you really have to be more aware of the different voices and have some kind of like authenticity. And so luckily when we started out, I was like, let's get a Vietnamese guy to play Mr. Nguyen, because that's what I wanted. I wanted Arnold's neighborhood to be really diverse. The boarding house was full of people who'd come from all over. And Mr. Nguyen was hilarious. We loved him. Bowen Coleman was the name of the character, the actor. And he spoke English with such a heavy accent that you often had a hard time figuring out what he was saying. And so I kind of limited what he would talk about, because it was hard for him to do regular kind of exposition where you just explain something complicated. And so he didn't say that much, and I just wanted him to be there and to be Mr. Nguyen. And when it was time to do the Christmas special, that was Steve Vixton, who was one of my writers. That was Steve's idea. Like, why don't we have the story is that there's a secret Santa, and everyone's playing. You draw a name, and then that you got to get a present for Arnold. And Arnold got Mr. Nguyen, and it would just mean Arnold had to go and interview Mr. Nguyen and kind of find out what kind of guy he was and what he might like for Christmas. And I thought that fine. And then when Steve suggested that what he really needed for Christmas was to find his long lost daughter that he got separated from in the Vietnam War, I was like, wow, that might be pretty hard for us to pull off. And so my biggest contribution to Arnold's Christmas is that I played producer and made it happen. Steve wanted to do the story and he wanted to write it, but I knew I was going to have to do a lot of work to get Nickelodeon to say, okay, you can do this story. And the first thing we had to do was make it okay with Mr. Nguyen, with Bowen, to say, Bowen, I want to do a story about the fall of Saigon, and you got separated from your daughter, and you were trying to save her. And I talked about the thing that I found most moving about the fall of Saigon was that refugees were being airlifted off the roof of the U.S. Embassy in helicopters, and it must have been an absolute panic and a terrible, terrible day when that happened. And Bowen said, you know what? I was on that roof. I did get helicoptered off of the roof. And so I knew I have to do this story. And then I can even tell the Nickelodeon execs, I can say, look, we've got this show where you have these diverse characters from different parts of the world. And here's a guy with a real Vietnam story. How can we not do it? It's really great. And it also was a great story. The sacrifice that Helga makes to get, and that she does it in secret. And she never tells Arnold that she was the Christmas angel who brought my win. Also, as a cartoon maker, when I finished the animation and I'm sitting there in post-production in a mixing stage, and we're sitting there putting the music, Jim Lang's incredibly good music on it, and the sound work and the actors' voices and all that stuff. And when we were making that, I was like, holy cow, this is as good as it gets. This is as good as cartoon making gets. The joy of putting those two people together and showing everybody crying. It's like there's not a dry eye in the house. And so I have nothing but fond memories of that. I remember Steve always was a fairly difficult guy, and he wanted to do things his way, and he would use me. He'd say, well, you just go take care of it. You go and you have that meeting with the execs and get them to approve this. I'm just going to be over here writing it. And so Steve, that was a good partnership. I had Steve for the weirdest, most out there ideas, and he had me to get along with everybody. That's the way that I'm the most Arnold. The thing that makes me the most Arnoldy is my ability to get everybody to get along. So I hope that answers your question, but
Yeah.
it was a brilliant idea, and Bowen Coleman is a very special guy, and getting him with his very thick accent to tell that really moving story. I think it's about a 2 or 3 minute long story that he tells about how he had to give up May and how he has been looking for her ever since.
No, no one can forget, the scene, the moment where Mr. Hume puts up his baby May, through the desperate crowd to that soldier, to unknown arms.
Yeah.
Everyone is still talking about it.
Yeah. Weird, huh? That's cool. That's the thing too. You have no idea how long something will stick around. We're very lucky that the show still gets to play on TV and people still get to see it. It would be sad if it disappeared altogether off of the TV and couldn't be seen anymore. I feel really lucky that we've already had 25 years and more for people to enjoy it and talk about it. It's I'm super grateful.
Everyone, that knows Mr. Hume sings The Simple Things. That song.
Yeah, and I can take credit for that. I wrote The Simple Things with Steve, and we it was a great day too. Steve, like I say, Steve was a difficult guy. He wasn't that easy to like. Our friendship was complicated, but sometimes we would just put aside all of our differences and just sit there and do something great, like when we sat there at night and wrote The Simple Things.
From the first episode, Craig, the show, it's like a declaration, of principles of the show, because that show us the city that is exciting to the kids, is amazing to be there, but it also has a dark side, a taxi driver atmosphere. And for instance, the money that the kids receive, they never told us that comes from crime or drugs. It doesn't come from a good place.
Exactly. Two criminals throw them a bag of money.
Yeah.
This cannot be good. This money can't. This money was gained in very bad way.
Yeah. So from the get-go, we get a sense that this place has a good side and a bad side.
Yeah. The thing I love about it too is the darkness. It's very nocturnal for a first half hour, and I was so happy that the part 2 of that story ends. Eugene's bike is the second 11, and at the end of Eugene's bike, it's night again, and they finished their. Arnold tried to give Eugene the perfect day, and everything went wrong, and he's all beat up, he's bandaged, and he has an eye patch, and Arnold's like, God, and when he's throwing up, when you cut to night and it's the end of their perfect day, he's throwing up off of the bridge, and Arnold's like, Eugene, I feel so bad. And so talk about a declaration of principles. That was meant to be both of those. Both of those stories featured Arnold in that way, where he was trying to make something went bad and he was trying to fix it. And that seemed like that was the place we wanted Arnold to be. He was kind of in the center of everything, trying to fix the terrible things that had happened. And so I felt like both stories touched on that. And both stories went into the night. And at the end of that story, Arnold tells Eugene, hey, I'm sorry. And Eugene says, no, you're the only one who's ever tried to do this for me. And I really, really appreciate it. And they shake hands, and the bus door closes on his fingers, and he's like, ow. And he drives away. And Arnold just looks at the bus as it goes away and goes like, and he walks across the bridge into the downtown. And I feel like that was a great declaration of principles, because I was promising kids, these kids are gonna kind of go into the urban night and they're gonna have adventures, and they'll be okay. They won't get killed. Nothing really terrible will happen, but there's going to be some darkness. And I really like that. It wasn't like we were always dark. I mean, the show went to a lot of places, and a lot of episodes took place in the noontime as well. But for me, I've always enjoyed, as an artist, I've always enjoyed making things happen in the dark, because it looks good. It appeals to my aesthetic to do these. I have some paintings that I really love that I've hung on to, that my painters did, of night scenes in Arnold's town, and they're some of my favorite scenes. I just love it. I knew that if the kids went out and did things at night, just like the main title, you know, the thing that promises is they'll all get out, they'll meet up at night, and they'll go have adventures.
Hey Arnold is a TV show where you can find mental issues. The first episode, I think there's Monkey Man yelling around, and you know, and then later on we're going to find out his origin story, this superhero.
Yeah.
Helga's mom, Miriam, who has you know, a tendency to margaritas and and chocolate kid addiction.
Yeah.
Right there. I mean, transpotting for kids almost, and not even for kids. I mean, it's shocking till this day how much Hey Arnold got away with in the best of senses. You know, when you grow up and you watch those episodes, it speaks about the experiences we are dealing with growing up.
Yeah. I figure we would go ahead and play it like that, like we're in a world of addiction and you know, all kinds of mental issues, and the kind of the grungy, the word that we used was grunge to describe the city that Arnold lived in. It was a northern American city. Interesting that you would say that there's urban scenes like that in Chile as well. I'll have to come visit sometime and see for myself. But and I'm glad too. I'm always glad when people see something they recognize in the world and go, I love this. It reminds me of my city. And they might be from Detroit or Chicago or Boston, or they could be from all kinds of places, but they say, I get it. It's got that feel. And so we just felt like by paying attention to those kind of details of graffiti and garbage and general funky grunginess, that was our way to show that it was everywhere, and the kids they had their own issues, and they were trying to do their own thing, and they moved through this, they navigated through this landscape, and it was their world. There was anything wrong with it, really. It was just their world. And I did try to imply that Arnold was kind of an artist. He sees beauty in ugliness that somebody else might miss. And I never had him say it out loud. I just wanted to show it because I thought that was kind of cooler if Arnold didn't really say that much about himself, and others spoke about him, and that's how kids understood him. And I also think that it really worked. I think kids understand Arnold way better than I would have guessed. When I first pitched the show and I described Arnold to my bosses, they weren't really convinced. They were like, well, who's Arnold? I don't get it. What's his deal? And I said, don't worry, Gerald will talk about who Arnold is. In admiration, he'll be like, oh, you're a bold kid, Arnold. Or Helga obviously will do those giant monologues where she talks about how much she worships him. And so I said, it'll be fine. We'll understand that Arnold's a cool kid because others will say so. But anyway, that you know, kind of to get back to the okayness of being a kid in a world that was kind of a mess. That's just how we wanted it to be. And I figured kids would get their part of the story. Kids would understand what Arnold was up to and what the stories were. And adults that were watching would go, oh, I recognize that. That's about addiction. And they would watch it and go, oh, Miriam's not just sleepy. She's drunk. I really appreciate that Nickelodeon let me do it. I think it would be very difficult to pitch Hey Arnold today, and it would be even harder to make it today. And for some of those reasons we were talking about too, with issues of gender and ethnicity and stuff, you have to be a lot more sensitive now. And when we were doing it, we were doing our best, but I know we probably made some mistakes and did some things that were not too, very politically correct, but we were just kind of trying to show our vision and trying to tell funny stories. We were just trying to make, we're trying to make a story that was funny enough that Nickelodeon would put it on the air.
Yeah. That scene where Chocolate Kid is carving, trying to find some scraps from chocolate in the garbage, and his eyes are
bloodshot.
Yeah, I can. It's an unforgettable episode, and has that logic, Craig, applied to Hey Arnold, that Arnold does everything he can to help others, but things not always work as he thinks it will work, because right away Chocolate Kid has to be addicted to something. Even when he drops chocolate, he goes back to something else. So Arnold is not a winner. That's what I like. It's a hero with many, layers. He's not a winner. He's not a loser. He's somewhere in between, and doesn't, he doesn't let failure it sucks his soul, his optimism towards life.
Yeah, that's really true. It's a philosophy of mine, and I've always felt that way. Like the only way you can learn anything is by trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing. And we had made our minds up. He couldn't be a big winner. That just wouldn't feel right. He had to. He did these things, and he didn't even know why he did it. We were kind of implying he was missing his parents, and so he had this big hole in his heart, and he was coming from behind because he didn't have his family wasn't complete, and so that was what was kind of causing him to be a do-gooder. Although in his mind he didn't even realize that. It was just that was why Arnold was who he was. He was the product of his mom and dad, and then his efforts to help others always. We used to joke that he would just get it a little further. He wouldn't get it all the way to the finish line. He would just move their world a little further ahead, and then we would also really try to undercut the happy ending with a joke that told you, like Eugene getting his door shut, his hand caught in the bus door. That's a classic example of how there's an undercut to a feel-good ending. And I felt like that growing up, and I love those kind of stories that had that kind of bittersweet quality, and I wanted to do the same. And I didn't want to promise kids that the world was perfect or that everything was going to be fine. I just wanted to show that if you want to take an example of a kid like Arnold, you would just try anyway, just try. I also would say since then, working on the PBS shows that I made, Dinosaur Train and Ready, Jet, Go, those were educational shows for smaller kids, for kids like 3 to 6 or 3 to 7. And we were trying to show kids that, especially in the science stuff, failure is not a bad thing. Failure is how you learn things. And that scientists like to call failure it's data collection. You're getting more data because your experiment failed. And it's been part of my storytelling ever since then. Hey Arnold had its own version of that, and the stuff I did, the educational TV that I did after that, has it as well. The message for kids is to just kind of like get up and keep going. and Arnold was like that. Buddy, the Tyrannosaur in Dinosaur Train, has that quality. And Jet, Propulsion, the alien kid who's the star of Ready, Jet, Go. He's a really good example of an avatar of mine. All of those three characters are kind of my avatar, where I can identify with Buddy because I was the youngest for a long time. I had a little sister about 8 years later, but for a long time it was me and my two older sisters on car trips. And I thought Buddy would be like me. And Jet, Propulsion, the alien kid, you can't get him down. He is cheerful to the bitter end. He'll never not be willing to try and try again. And he's not afraid to fail. And so those are all, they work as avatars for me in my storytelling. And I find it really useful too, from my point of view, I can tell the execs when I'm making a show, well, that's how I was when I was a kid. And then they'll often go, oh, okay, you can tell that story about addiction or whatever.